Why do you always think the worst of me? Why can't you ever believe that I am not the problem? Ifeoma frowned, surprised by her daughter's sudden outburst. Amaka, watch your mouth, she warned, her voice cold. You are old enough to know better than to speak to your mother in that way. Amaka said nothing more. In the peaceful village of Nkalago, there lived a very wealthy fishermonger named Chinonso. He was well respected in the village, not only because he was rich, but because he was a kind and generous man. Chinonso's fish business was the biggest in the village, and everyone knew him for the fresh big fish he sold at the market every day. His wife, Ifeoma, was the most beautiful woman in the village. She had smooth, dark skin that glowed in the sunlight and a smile that could brighten anyone's day. Ifeoma was also known for a good heart, always ready to help those in need. Together, Chinonso and Ifeoma made a perfect couple, admired by everyone in Nkalago. One day, the village was buzzing with excitement when news spread that Ifeoma had given birth to twins. In Nkalago, having twins was considered a rare and special blessing. People believed that twins brought double happiness to their family and even to the entire village. Chinonso and Ifeoma were the first couple in Nkalago to have twins, and this made the villagers even more excited. They named their twin daughters Nkechi and Amaka. As the twins grew, the villagers noticed that they looked exactly the same. Nkechi and Amaka both had big dark eyes that sparkled like stars. Their brown skin was so smooth as silk, and their smiles could make anyone happy. But even though they looked alike, the twins were very different in how they behaved. Nkechi was a quiet, calm child who always did what she was told. She never caused any trouble and was always polite and kind. Amaka, on the other hand, was full of energy. She was curious, always asking questions, and sometimes she could be a bit stubborn. While Nkechi liked to sit quietly and play with her dolls, Amaka preferred to run around outside, exploring and playing games with other children. Chinonso and Ifeoma loved their daughters, but as time went on, they started to show more love and attention to Nkechi. They were proud of how well behaved and gentle she was. Nkechi was a kind of daughter who made their lives easier, and they often praised her in front of others. "Nkechi, you are such a good girl," they would say, smiling with pride. "You always make us proud." Amaka, however, felt left out. She loved her parents and wanted to make them proud too. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't be like Nkechi. She was full of energy and loved to play and laugh. But it seems like her parents didn't appreciate that as much. Amaka noticed that her mother and father praised Nkechi more often, and this made her feel bad. One day, there was a big festival in the village. The festival was time for music, dancing, and lots of food. Everyone in Nkalago looked forward to it, and the children were especially excited because They could wear their best clothes and have fun with their friends. Chinonso had bought beautiful matching dresses for Nkechi and Amaka to wear to the festival. The dresses were bright blue with lovely patterns, and both girls were excited to put them on. But when Ifeoma brought out the dresses, Amaka noticed something that made her heart sink. Nkechi's dress was decorated with extra beads and shiny embroidery, making it look fancier than hers. Amaka's dress was still pretty, but it wasn't as special as Nkechi's own. When they arrived at the festival, everyone noticed how beautiful Nkechi looked. "Nkechi, you look just like a princess," one of the village women said, bending down to admire her dress. "Such a beautiful child." Amaka stood next to her sister, hoping someone would compliment her too. But the women only glanced at her and then turned away. Amaka felt her smile faded, but she didn't say anything. She tried to push the feelings aside and enjoy the festival. But it was hard when everyone seems to be focused on her sister. As the festival went on, Amaka and the other children played game near the big bonfire in the middle of the village. Amaka was having a great time running around and laughing with her friends. But while they were playing, she accidentally bumped into another child, and they both fell into the ground. The other children started crying, and before Amaka could help them up, Ifeoma came rushing over. "Amaka, why can't you be more careful?" Ifeoma scolded her, her voice sharp and angry. "Look at you, always causing trouble." Amaka's cheek turned into red with embarrassment. She didn't mean to cause any trouble, but now everyone was looking at her. Nkechi, who had been playing nearby, quickly came over to defend her sister. "Mama, it was an accident," Nkechi said softly, trying to help. But Ifeoma was not pleased. She shook her head and frowned. "Nkechi, don't make excuses for her. She needs to learn to be more like you. Quiet, respectful, and well-behaved." Amaka stood there, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. She wanted to tell her mother that it wasn't fair, that she didn't mean to cause any trouble. But the words wouldn't come out. Instead, she turned and ran away from the crowd. Her heart heavy with the weight of her mother's words. Amaka ran to her favorite place in the village, a small clearing by the river, hidden from the rest of the village. A river was calm, and sound of the water flowing over the rocks always made Amaka feel better. She sat down on the grassy bank, hugging her knees to the chest. She couldn't stop thinking about how her parents treated her differently from Nkechi. It hurt her deeply, and she couldn't understand why they didn't love her the same way. As Amaka sat there, feeling sad and alone, she heard someone approaching. She looked up and saw Nneka, the wise old woman from the village, walking towards her. Nneka was known for her wisdom and kindness, and she often told stories to the children. Without saying a word, Nneka sat down beside Amaka and looked out at the river. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then, Nneka broke the silence. "Do you know why the river flows, little one?" she asked, her voice gentle and calm. Amaka shook her head. looking up at Nneka with curious eyes. The river overflows because it must, Nneka explained, her eyes still fixed on the water. It doesn't stop when it meets a stone or a fallen branch. It finds a way around them, always moving forward. Amaka listened carefully, not quite understanding what Nneka meant. But why do my parents love Nkechi more than me? She asked, the question that had been bothering her finally coming out. Nneka sighed and reached out gently, brushed a coil from Amaka's forehead. Your parents love you, Amaka, but sometimes people are down to what is easy. What brings them joy without much effort. Nkechi is like a calm river, easy to love because she causes no trouble. But you, Amaka, are like the river. When it meets a rock, you are strong. And that strength sometimes scares people. Amaka thought about Nneka's words, but she still felt confused. But why can't they love me the same way they love Nkechi? She asked, her voice small and sad. Nneka smiled gently. Love is not always the same, little one. But that doesn't mean you are less. You are strong and full of life. And that is something special. Remember, the river is strong too, and it carves its own path. Amaka leaned against Nneka, feeling a little better, though she didn't fully understand everything the old woman had said. They sat together in silence, watching the river flow, each lost in their own thoughts. That night, when Amaka went to bed beside her sister, she still felt the heavy weight of her parents' expectations pressing down on her. She loved Nkechi very much, but she couldn't shake the feelings that no matter what she did, she would never be enough in her parents' eyes. As the years passed, the feelings only grew stronger, and the gap between the sisters began to widen. Amaka continued to be lively and full of questions, but she often felt lonely, wishing that her parents could see her the way they saw Nkechi. And though she tried her best to be good like Nkechi, she remained the daughter, no matter how hard she tried. Always seems to be just a little too much for her parents to handle. By the time the twins turned 16, the differences in how they were treated became clear to everyone in the village. Nkechi was like a shining star in Okeke's family, always receiving praises for being so good and quiet. Amaka, on the other hand, had learned to be careful with what she did and said, always waiting for the next scolding or criticism. In the village of Nkalago, people started noticing how differently the twins were treated. Nkechi was often invited to help with the tasks at the homes of the respected elders. The elders would praise her for her kindness and gentle nature. They would say things like, Nkechi, you are such a sweet child, or your parents must be so proud of you. Nkechi would smile shyly and thank them, feeling happy to be so well liked. Amaka, however, was rarely invited to help, and when she was, it was usually because they needed someone to carry heavy things, fetch water, or gather firewood. The elders often talked about her wild nature, saying things like, that girl, Amaka, she's too stubborn, or if only she could be more like her sister. These words hurt Amaka deeply, though she never let anyone see how much. As time went by, Amaka started to feel more and more upset. It was like a thorny vine was growing around her heart, making it harder for her to be happy. She spent more time alone, wandering around the village and nearby forest. Some villagers began to gossip about her, saying that she was strange or even cursed. They whispered that it wasn't normal for a child to be so solitary. They said she had too much fire on her, and that fire would only lead to trouble. One hot afternoon, Amaka was at the stream, filling her pot with water. As she was about to leave home, she heard her parents talking. Their voices were coming from the house, and she couldn't help but be curious about what they were saying. Quietly, she walked closer and crouched down near the open window, listening. I just don't understand why she can't be more like Nkechi, Ifeoma was saying. Her voice sounded frustrated. She is always getting into trouble, always causing problems. Nkechi is so good, so obedient. She is different. Ifeoma, Chinonso replied, though he sounded tired. But maybe she will grow out of it. Maybe with time she will learn. Learn what? Ifeoma snapped. To be more like her sister? I don't know if she will ever. It's like she enjoys making things difficult for us. Amaka's heart sank as she listened to her parents talk about her like she was some kind of problem. She had always known that they liked Nkechi more. But hearing them say it out loud made her feel like a knife was stabbing her heart. She backed away from the window, her breath catching in her throat. But she didn't want to cry where they might see her. Instead, she turned and ran towards the forest. She ran and ran, not stopping until her legs ached and her lungs burned. She didn't stop until she reached the river. When she got there, she collapsed by the water edge. Finally letting the tears flow, she cried and cried, letting out all the pain she had been holding inside for so long. Nkechi, meanwhile, had started to notice the change in her sister. The twins, who had once been so close, were now drifting apart. Amaka was becoming more distant and withdrawn, and Nkechi didn't understand why. She tried to talk to Amaka, to ask her what was wrong, but Amaka's answer were short, sometimes even angry. It was like the bond they once shared was slowly coming apart, thread by thread. One evening, after another failed attempt to talk to Amaka, Nkechi felt so sad and worried that she decided to talk to their grandmother, Nwoye, who had come to visit. Nwoye was a wise woman, known for understanding people's hearts. Nkechi found her sitting by the fire, and she sat down beside her, her heart heavy with worry. "Nne, I'm worried about Amaka," Nkechi said quietly. Nwoye looked at her with kind eyes. "What is troubling you, my daughter?" she asked, gently stroking Nkechi's hair. "She is not the same anymore," Nkechi explained. "She doesn't talk to me like she used to. She always upset, and I don't know why. I don't want to lose her, but I don't know what to do." Nwoye listened carefully, nodding as Nkechi spoke. "Amaka is not angry with you, Nwam. Nwoye said softly, "She is angry with the world. It is not easy to be compared to someone else all the time, especially someone you love." "But what can I do, Nne?" Nkechi asked, her voice trembling. "I don't want to lose her." "You must be patient," Nwoye replied. "Give her time. She will come to you when she is ready. But remember, Nkechi, it is not your fault. You both are good children, just different. Do not carry her burden on your shoulder." Nkechi nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. She didn't want to lose her sister, but she don't know how to make things better. As the days turned into weeks and then months, the divide between the two sisters only seemed to grow wider, and Nkechi feared that one day it would be too wide to cross. Amaka, meanwhile, spent more time and more time by the river, where she felt safe from the world expectations. She often thought about the words she had overheard from her parents, and each time the pain in her heart grew stronger. She wanted to be loved by her parents as much as Nkechi was, but it seems like no matter what she did, she would never be good enough. One day, while sitting by the river, Amaka spotted on the old woman from the village walking towards her. It was Nneka, the same woman who had comforted her years ago. Nneka sat down beside her, not saying a word at first. She simply looked out at the river, watching the water flow. After a while, Nneka turned to Amaka. "The river still flows, little one," she said gently. "No matter what, it keeps moving forward." Amaka didn't say anything. She just nodded, feeling the old woman's words sink into her heart. "Sometimes life is not fair," Nneka continued. "Sometimes people do not see the good in us because they are too focused on what they want us to be. But that does not mean you are less, Amaka. You are strong, just like the river. You have a fire in you, and the fire is a gift, not a curse." Amaka looked up at Nneka, her eyes filled with tears. "But why don't they love me like they love Nkechi?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nneka sighed, reaching out gently to touch Amaka's cheek. "Love comes in many forms, my dear. Sometimes people love in ways that are not fair, but that does not mean you are not worthy of love. Your parents may not understand you now, but one day they will see your strength and your heart. Until then, you must be patient, just like the river." Amaka nodded, though she still felt the pain in her heart. But Nneka's words gave her a small bit of comfort, and for that, she was grateful. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the village, Amaka stood up and wiped her tears. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she also knew that she had the strength to keep moving forward, just like the river. Amaka's feelings of rejection and loneliness grew each passing day, and soon she began to feel like a shadow in her home. Nkechi was the light, always praised and loved, while Amaka felt like the darkness, always blamed and forgotten. The pain of being treated differently from her twin sister made her heart heavy, and she often wondered why she wasn't good enough for her parents or the villagers. Amaka started spending more and more time in the forest, away from prying eyes and harsh judgment of the villagers and her own family. The forest became her safe place, a world where she could be herself without fear of being judged or scolded. Here, among the trees and animals, Amaka felt a sense of peace, though it was mixed with deep sadness. She would sit by the river, watching the water flow, and wonder why she felt so alone, even when she was surrounded by the people. But the villagers began to notice Amaka's frequent absence, and they started to talk. Whenever they saw her sneaking away to the forest, their eyes would narrow, and their whisper would start. They began to believe that something was wrong with Amaka. Some even suggested that she was cursed or bewitched, that her fiery nature was unnatural. Have you seen how often Amaka disappeared into the forest? One villager whispered to another as they passed by their house. Yes, I have noticed, the other replied, shaking her head. It's not right for a child to be so alone. I think there is something strange about that girl. This rumor quickly spread, and soon they reached the ears of Chinonso and Ifeoma, who were already worried about how to handle their distant daughter. Instead of trying to understand what Amaka was going through, they decided to impose stricter rules, hoping it would fix the problem. Amaka, you are not allowed to go to the forest anymore, Chinonso told her sternly one evening. You will stay home and help with the chores. No more wandering around like a wild child. But Papa, the forest is the only place where I feel free, Amaka protested, her voice trembling. Enough, Ifeoma snapped. You will listen to your father. We are doing this for your own good, Amaka. You need to learn to behave properly. Amaka's heart sank. She felt like a caged bird, her wings clipped, and her spirit slowly being crushed by the weight of her parents' expectation and the villagers' cruel gossip. She didn't understand why they didn't see that the forest was the only place where she could breathe, where she didn't feel like she was drowning in her own home. Nkechi watched all of this with growing concern. She saw how her sister withdrew further into herself, becoming more distant and cold. Nkechi tried to reach out, to bring Amaka back to the way things used to be. But every time she did, she was met with cold indifference or sharp words. Amaka, do you want to play with me? Nkechi asked one afternoon, hoping to cheer her sister up with their favorite game. No, Nkechi, I am not in the mood, Amaka replied, not even looking up from the ground. But we used to have so much fun together, Nkechi said softly, her voice filled with sadness. Why don't we play like we used to? Because things aren't the same anymore, Amaka said, her voice flat. You won't understand. It was as if Amaka had built a wall around herself, a wall that Nkechi couldn't climb. The once inseparable twins We are now like strangers, living in the same house, but worlds apart. One day, as Amaka was returning from one of her secret walks in the forest, she saw a group of village children playing near the edge of the woods. They were laughing and chasing each other, their joy so bright that it made darkness in Amaka's heart feel even heavier. She watched them from a distance, a longing stirring in the heart. She wished she could join them, but she knew how they saw her different, strange, and not someone they wanted to play with. One of the children noticed her standing there, and the laughter stopped. The older boy, who was known for being mean, sneered at her. "Look, it is Winch," he shouted, pointing at Amaka. "Stay away from her, or she will curse you." The other children giggled nervously, their eyes wide with fear and curiosity. They had heard the rumors too, and now they looked at Amaka as if she was something dangerous. Amaka felt a surge of anger rise within her, and before she could stop herself, she marched over the boy who had spoken. "I am not a witch," she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "I am not cursed. You don't know anything." The boy, taken aback by her sudden outburst, pushed her away. "Stay back, or I will tell my father," he threatened, though his voice was wavered with fear. Amaka's fists clenched, and for a moment, it looked as though she might strike him. But then, she remembered the last time she had gotten into trouble, how her parents had scolded her in front of everyone, and the fire in her eyes dimmed. Without another word, she turned and ran, the children's laughter echoing in her ears like a cruel song. When she got home, her mother noticed the dirt in her clothes and the tears in her eyes. "What happened, Amaka?" Ifeoma asked, her voice thin, as she saw her daughter's disheveled appearance. "Nothing," Amaka muttered, not meeting her mother's gaze. "If you have been causing trouble again," Ifeoma began, her tone sharp, but Amaka couldn't hold back her frustration any longer. "I wasn't causing any problem," she snapped, her voice breaking with emotion. "Why do you always think the worst of me? Why can't you ever believe that I am not the problem?" Ifeoma frowned, surprised by her daughter's sudden outburst. "Amaka, watch your mouth," she warned, her voice cold. "You are old enough to know better than to speak to your mother in that way." Amaka said nothing more. She simply walked past her mother and went to her room, closing the door behind her with a loud thud. Inside, she let the tears flow freely, feeling more alone than ever before. As she cried, Nkechi, who had heard the commotion, came to her room. She knocked softly on the door before entering, her heart aching for her sister. "Amaka, what is wrong?" Nkechi asked gently, sitting beside her on the bed and wrapping her arms around her shoulders. But Amaka shrugged her off, her eyes still wet with tears. "Nothing you would understand, Nkechi," she replied coldly. "You are the one everyone loves, the one who do no wrong." Nkechi's heart ached at her sister's words. She wanted to help, to take away the pain she knew Amaka was feeling. But she didn't know how. She had always tried to be the perfect daughter, thinking it would make her parents happy. But now, she realized it was making Amaka miserable. "I am sorry, Amaka," Nkechi whispered, her voice full of sorrow. I am sorry if I made you feel this way. I just want us to be close again, like we used to be. But Amaka didn't respond. She just stared at the wall, her expression distant, as if she were somewhere far away, in a place where no one could reach her. Nkechi stayed with her for a while longer, hoping her presence would bring some comfort, but eventually she left, knowing that there was nothing more she could do. As she closed the door behind her, she couldn't shake the feelings that she was losing her sister bit by bit, and that soon Amaka would be lost to her completely.